Hello, welcome to One Moment Wiser. This is Christy Bridges, and we are doing a series of interviews here at One Moment Wiser to help you love your life more moment by moment. I have with us today Cheryl Stevens. She has her own podcast and Facebook page called Back to Living. And it's been a real inspiration for me. And I thought she probably has something to say to you also. I want to get to know her better, and I know that you'll be happy that we did. So we're going to pause for a second and share our post so that everybody can join us watching. Let's see here. And if you're here, give us a shout out. If you are listening to the replay and you haven't yet been to, if you're watching us on Facebook and you haven't yet been to my podcast, One Moment Wiser, find that podcast on any of the podcast services that you might use and subscribe, because I'm going to keep coming up with really interesting people and really good tips for living. Here we go.
I don't know if mine's shared or not.
Well, I'll just tag you.
Okay. I'm having computer problems. We've had so much rain, everything is wet, including the lines.
Including your lines. That's crazy. You know, I'm in Des Moines right now, and I went out for lunch just because I've been in the hotel all weekend. Went out for lunch, and when I got out to my car, little bits of ice were pinging me in the head. Wait a minute. Tulsa, and when that happens, it's usually around July, and we're about to get a tornado. But no, now it's 30 degrees and icing. So, Cheryl, I am so glad you joined us today. Thank you for being here. You are a woman of many talents. You actually just launched an Etsy page, right? An Etsy store? So,
yes.
What is in your Etsy store?
Right now, just a little bit. And we'll get into this later, but a couple of years ago when my husband passed away, I held up in my house for about a year, and I did craft work and I crocheted a lot, and this painting behind me is one of them I did. I've got paintings like that. They're canvas with burlap crosses on them, most of them. I have a few Halloween bags, treat bags, that kids carry around to collect Halloween in.
Yeah.
And just trying to sell, I guess, or showcase some of the stuff I've collected. I've made something and put it in a box, and I'd make something and put it in a box. So I'm running out of room for those boxes.
I understand. I grew up with a quilter, and my mom actually, she quilts, crocheted, needlepoint, every kind of possible thing that you could make for home decor. And finally, she had to start a business because she's like, somebody else needs this stuff, and I don't want to stop buying pretty fabrics.
Yes. If you can see my yarn stash behind us, it's and then on the other wall is all cubes of fabric. So yeah, we have that same weakness.
Though, I have to say, I've never really liked my sewing. I have expectations that when I sew, it'll turn out like something mom did, and that's not the truth. And so I don't care to sew. I've crocheted a little bit, but it takes me forever to do anything. But I am still so inspired when I walk around a fabric store. If I want to feel creative, I'll walk around a fabric store, because growing up, that was the place that my mom just lit up, and she could fill the room with just vibrations of inspiration. It was really cool.
Oh, I know that. My grandmother taught me to sew when I was about 9.
Yeah.
I made my first outfit for me, and I actually remember what it was and wore it to school when I was 11.
Oh, cool.
I'm about to be 63, so that's how long I've been sewing. So, but I guess it's because of my grandmother and the the way she taught me, I can see a piece of fabric and visualize what would look good made out of that fabric. And some things aren't what people would think. So it's just, oh, that would be so pretty in that. And so, yeah, I go to the store and that's my problem. I can see all of these different things and then buy it and never get it made.
I still have a skirt that my mom made for my 8th grade prom. She made this really pretty white circle skirt and a little lace top to go with it. I don't have the top anymore, but I still have that skirt. And I still have some dolls that she made me and stuff. So I'm glad that you do that.
Yeah, I
So
made my own wedding dress. I've still got it. So
you made your own wedding dress? That's amazing. So you have had some skills and some things that brought you joy all the way back from childhood, it sounds like.
Yes.
But a few years ago, you kind of forgot about those, or none of those things seemed to matter to you.
Right.
What happened? Tell us a little bit about that.
I lost my husband in February 2016 after 41 years of marriage.
Oh.
And I was very lost because I got married at 19. I moved from my home with my family in with my husband, and I had never lived alone. And even at my age, it was terrifying, extremely isolated, it felt like, in this house. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to see anybody. Um, I had some repair work to do in my house, and I hired that out. And my dog and I held up in my bedroom. I could close it off from the rest of the house, and we stayed there most of the year. I'd lay there and watch TV, or that's pretty much what I did. It's just I didn't know at that time how to move forward. I had lost my dad 6 years before, and the weekend I got home, I stayed with my mom for about 10 days. And when I got home, I was home 2 days and found out my husband had stage 3, moving into stage 4 cancer. So I think that all built up from not really grieving very long for my father into moving into grieving for my husband. He fought 6 years with cancer. And there were peaks and valleys in that. My daughter and son both got engaged. They both got married in that 6 years. But we had 3 grandchildren in that time.
Oh.
But when you're with someone every day for 40 plus years and all of a sudden they're just not there, just very lost, very lost.
You can imagine. So you had your family still around, and I know that you believe in God. You pray and you trust God. But still, even with that, there, like you said, you're one person that you're there with all the time for the biggest part of your life isn't there, and you still feel the emptiness. I want to say, we think that having all the answers or having all the solutions will mean that we don't have the emotions. But that's not true, is it?
Right, it's not. And one thing that I struggled with, and very wise Sunday school teacher, Bible study teacher and Sunday school teacher, people say, but you're a Christian, you shouldn't have depression, shouldn't have those things, but you do. And that was my grieving. I tried, my kids were here, and they had their families, that they had their jobs that they moved on with. They would check in with me. I saw them all the time, but it just wasn't the same. Your children, you just don't have. We're very, very close, but that one person that's there with you anytime you're in this house pretty much is gone. Yeah. And you do move into depression. I had anxiety before that because when he was that bad and the trials weren't working, we knew the end was coming. And even with that, It was hard. It was really hard. It's just people believing that because you're a Christian, you shouldn't be depressed is something I grappled with. It's like, but yes, I am. I
Right?
know that he's in a much better place, and I'll see him someday, but he's still not here. The human person still grieves, and
Absolutely.
yeah,
Now, you went to grief counseling for a little bit. You went to a grief support
I
group, is that
tried.
right?
I did try, um, and there was maybe 15 people there.
Mhm.
One person didn't come back after the first lesson. I lasted for about 4,
Yeah.
but I would come home. It was on Sunday evenings, Sunday late afternoon, and I'd come home and I'd start crying and not want to get out of bed the next day. So I knew that wasn't the way I needed to deal with my grief. Um, and even the leader of the group said, you're not ready for this. You're just not, it's not time for you to go through something like this right now.
That's a
So,
really perceptive leader, because when we have a solution that we know people need, grief counseling is very important for some people.
right,
And when we have a solution that's well researched and we know helps people, sometimes we want to press that solution and go, well, you know what? It's not the solution, it's you. And that's not necessarily true. We have
right,
to be aware of ourselves and where we're at and have the guts to assess whether this is working or not. Whether, maybe I'm just not feeling it, but if I go a little bit longer, I'll get it, or whether it's just time to quit. And your leader had the emotional awareness to say, it isn't you. You're not
right,
ready for this. So
right.
I'm really glad for that. And since then, you have started a podcast to help other people go through this, right? You
Yes,
actually, I love your podcast because it's
thank
so
you.
natural. It's like I'm sitting there having coffee with my, friend in the morning, just living life. Tell us why you started this podcast.
Well, going through the counseling and knowing that was not for me, I learned, and people would ask me, like the people I met through some of the classes and stuff, would ask me how I was doing and did you ever feel this? And the more I would talk about my feelings and some of the struggles I had, it actually triggered memories of good things. That's kind of strange, but it helped ease some of that grief and let me remember some of the good and happy times that and they're coming more and more frequently now. It's not always the heartache. It's remembering when we were first married and we were married 5 years before we had kids and just going out to the mall and walking and holding hands and just things like that you forget about after you have kids. You forget about that. So
Yeah.
but those memories are now starting to come back, and it does ease the pain to talk about it. I think last week I talked about the guilt that I felt. Not everyone feels that, but the last week of my husband's life, it was really bad. He had taken pain medicine for so long that his body was collecting it and not getting rid of it. So he pretty much was poisoned with all this pain medicine. I think the cancer had probably moved to his brain, so the last few days it wasn't him.
Right.
And I had that guilt of should I have agreed to keep him sedated? Should I have done something else? And
Right.
even though I know the answer would have been the same, would it have made a difference in the last few days of his life? And I've come to terms with that. Um, it still creeps up every now and then,
Mhm.
but yeah, just and talking about all of this, talking now, it helps me. That's what I needed to get through my grief. Everyone's different. I've learned that everyone grieves absolutely differently. Um, I I know right after he passed, I couldn't go back into the house to see the wheelchair and the hospital bed and all of his medicines. And I had a wonderful hospice team that came, and when I was in the backyard, when I came back in, everything was gone.
Oh,
Uh,
that's wonderful.
so I
How
didn't have to
perspective.
do that. Yes. So um, I remember my mom going through that, didn't want to see anything of my dad's. I can't go in my bathroom because all of his stuff is there. And we had to move everything out. And I just remember when I lost Cheryl and I was talking that day to the hospice people, it's like, I can't go back in and see all of that. I can't go back in my house. And they made sure that I could go back in and I could go to my bedroom, and which I didn't stay there for a few nights. But I mean, this house my husband grew up in, he lived here 60 years, and I lived here 41 with him. So um, lots of memories here. But yeah, I've learned that for me, talking is my therapy. Um,
Absolutely.
it just it helps me remember a lot of the good times. God's bringing back those as I get rid of some of the grief. He's bringing back the fun and the good memories.
It's funny if we don't express it. And we don't want to keep repeating the same sorrow over and over. There's a part of us that knows that that'll eventually drag us down. But at the same time, if we don't get it out of our minds and funnel it through our mouths or through our pens, then it just pings around inside our head, incapacitating us. And so
That
being
yeah,
able to express it, it does lighten the load, and it makes room, like you said, for those positive memories. I am really impressed with the hospice people who didn't just take care of him, but they actually made that return home easier for you. That is such a blessing.
yes, it
I
was.
I appreciate. We're almost out of time, but I could talk to you all day. I swear I need to lengthen these things. But people can keep listening to you on your podcast, and I think you said something that is probably the reason that I enjoy your podcast so much is that as you talk about what you're going through, number one, you're kind of reflecting an experience that all of us at some point either have been through or will, and you're doing it in a way that's letting it go, and you're bringing up some good memories at the same time. So it is just comforting somehow. And when you had that guilt over, should I, done this differently? What do you say to yourself when you have a moment where you're regretting something that you physically cannot go back in time and fix, and you don't know how it would have worked out? What do you say to yourself at those times?
Um, I again, first thing I say is out loud is Satan, go away. You're not going to steal my joy. And
Amen. Say that again.
and then I ask God to help me just forget or get past that point. Um, and you said something that I was going to say earlier, that in therapy I was reliving the day he passed away every time I went. So it
Oh,
was like
fantastic. Yeah.
every week I was living it over and over and over, and I just couldn't continue that. So yeah, this is how I have learned to cope. And I've always said if I can just help one person, if they can listen, I would love to interview anyone. But it's just my story documenting how I'm getting through this, and hopefully can help somebody along the way.
hmm Okay, so I'm going to put out your podcast name here, Back to Living, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. That way everybody will see that.
Well, thank you.
Cheryl, you have been such a blessing, and you continue to be a blessing to me. So I thank you so much for being part of this today.
Well, thank you. You're going to have to reciprocate now and come to mine.
I would love to. If
Okay.
you, yeah, if you are listening to us or watching us, just leave a little comment, but definitely follow Cheryl, subscribe to her podcast, and you'll learn great tips for well, healing and for recognizing and dealing with some of those negative thoughts, but also when you're caring for others, just like she shared today, there are intelligent ways that we can care for people who are grieving. So God bless you, and thank you for joining us for One Moment Wiser. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.